We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insight, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Friday, June 26th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Ki.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, and also Fabulous with us.
End of the week.
End of the week, finally. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're now at the end of the work week, and what better way to wrap things up than with a lively debate on one of life's everyday dilemmas. Whether it's weddings, funerals, or other milestone events, social gatherings are an inseparable part of human relationships, but knowing which ones we should or have to attend can sometimes be surprisingly complicated. So to start off our discussion today, Ki, how good are you at showing up for weddings or other social events?
I'm a goer.
Oh, okay.
Social person,
I can see that, actually. You know?
I have lots of them, but as I grow older, unfortunately, I get more of a funeral letters than wedding invitations.
Ooh, okay.
A lot of my friends are already,
You're ready to go to one today, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And some of my friends' parents suddenly passed away already, including my late father. So nowadays, I try to show up more at the funerals and less at weddings. I still send cash gifts to the weddings, as that's how the tradition goes in Korea. And there's also saying that you should not miss 조사, meaning the sad events like at funerals. As a matter of fact, this week only, I've been to 2 funerals already, Monday and Tuesday, when my friend's father passed away and also one of my colleagues' father passed away. And one of the funeral place was a 2-hour drive from Seoul, but I still drove there anyways to show respect.
I think people do really remember when people are there for you during like the hard times.
For sure, for
right.
sure.
So what about you, Fabio?
Completely, as you both mentioned, showing up is very important, especially at funerals. It's not something you would like to miss, and you do a lot of sacrifices just in order to be there. But for weddings, I do tend to think a little bit more about the relationship that I have with that person and then consider whether I want to attend or not. There's a lot of things that go into it. But if it's someone that I do appreciate, I always go with an open heart.
Yeah, it's always good to celebrate the happy couple. So for today's debate, we're going to dive deeper into social occasions and discuss which ones we should actually attend. So as attitudes towards weddings, funerals, and other life events evolve, so do the unwritten rules surrounding them. So how have then, changing lifestyles altered the way we approach social occasions, Ki?
Sure. Giving cash gifts for wedding, funerals, and other family occasions like a kid's first birthday has long been a cherished tradition in Korea, reflecting the spirit of mutual support and community. But attitudes are shifting, especially among younger generations, with the rise of small weddings or no wedding ceremonies at all, and soaring living costs. People are rethinking how much they should give and even who should be invited. So first birthday celebration for a kid, for example, are now much more likely to be intimate family-only gatherings rather than the large events that were once the norm, where they invite the large crowds of people having friends, family, and everybody.
So it seems tradition still matters, but the definition of who's expected to show up is becoming a bit more flexible. And speaking of changing expectations, perhaps the most sensitive issue, I think we can all agree, is the money. So Fabio, I know you've been to both funerals and weddings here in Korea. So how much do people decide how much to give? This is a really hard question for a lot of people.
Right. So factors such as how close you are to that person, or even your rank at work, and even the cost of the funeral or the wedding itself may be important to consider when it comes to how much money you are able to give. So if we take a look at the screen, we can see that the average condolence and congratulatory money gifts tend to be pretty round numbers. A very small percentage of them tend to gift 50,000 Korean won or less. But unless you are a student or not able to physically attend the event, it can even be considered rude. For example, the cost that goes into preparing a funeral is pretty crazy. And then at weddings, a meal voucher, an individual meal voucher would be around 50,000 to even 100,000 Korean won. So the standard to play it safe is to pay 100,000 Korean won, which translates to around 60 to 70 US dollars. And as we can see, most of the percentage is related to this specific amount. But we also see a significantly big percentage of people that decide to gift 150,000 or even 200,000 Korean won. And it seems like the closest the friend is, or if it's a family member, this amount tends to get bigger. And in fact, I helped some friends last time. They had a wedding, and I was the one counting the money.
And this is in Korea, right?
Exactly.
So
yes.
cool.
I was the only foreigner there counting money, but the interesting thing about that is that I realized how comfortable it was to gift only 100,000 Korean won because it's a standard type.
And you would know because you were the one counting and adding up.
Exactly, it was
those
pretty
numbers.
standard. But another thing that I realized is that society as a whole is becoming much more individualized, and people tend to keep their circles much smaller. So it was very interesting to see how many of the guests were actually friends of the parents of the couple, instead
Okay.
of close friends to the couple. So we are seeing also a generational gap, not only in terms of how much money they give, but in terms of attendance.
But in Korea, that makes sense because in Korea, a lot of weddings are often called the party of it's like the parents' party. So I guess that might be where it comes in.
Yes.
So it sounds like relationships are becoming more selective at the same time, with people placing less emphasis on obligation, more on personal closeness. So this brings us to a situation many people have faced at least once. So, should you show up for a friend you no longer keep in touch with regularly, so haven't been really in contact with you, and then they suddenly contact you, asking you to come to their wedding? So, what are your thoughts on this, Ki?
Well, yeah, for me, even if you've lost touch over the years, I think it's worth showing up and your support if you want to share the close relationship, and if they approached you first, right? And in Korea, that's seen as part of the culture of mutual support, tongue or affection, and many people also believe that the kindness you show to others will eventually come back to you. And maybe I'm just that kind of guy who just have to be that way, because a couple of weeks ago I hosted a wedding for a junior from the college, and he hadn't been in contact with me for about 5 years or so. And
Okay,
then,
wow.
he called me up and he asked me if I could MC his wedding. So I was like, oh, I'll be glad to, because it's your special day, I'll be there. And I drove all the way down to Busan and I
Wow.
did MC for him.
You are a great 선배. You're a great friend.
Completely.
That's like a
If
big
free,
thing
then
to
I'll-
do.
yeah.
Right. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, that is a very interesting example. I think you might have the chance to catch up with someone that you haven't seen in a while, but in my opinion, sometimes it might be a little too sudden. And I tend to think to myself, am I planning on really developing this relationship in the future or not? Because depending on that, if you don't really have the heart to go into it, I think it might be even better to just scrap it out and not even attend the wedding. Because what is really the point? Sometimes you are approached by people and you're wondering to yourself, are they really inviting me because they need more guests?
Right.
Or do they really want to catch up with me? And so there is that dilemma pretty much playing in this situation. So in my opinion, if you're feeling like you're a little bit lazy about attending the wedding, if it's someone that you're not really in touch with, maybe just not going might be the best option, and just sending a congratulatory message might be enough.
So one side sees it as maintaining goodwill, while the other believes sincerity matters more than obligation. But sometimes the dilemma isn't about relationships at all, it's about tradition and superstition. So should personal milestones or superstitions affect whether then someone attends a social event, Fabio?
Well, this is very interesting because we are talking about boundaries and milestones that are personal.
Right.
So as everything that becomes personal, it does spark a lot of debate. So I brought actually two specific cases. The first one is about a man who got into conflict with his fiancée after attending a close friend's funeral 4 months before their wedding. Now, according to a traditional belief, if you attend a funeral before a wedding, especially if it is your own wedding, it might be a sign of bad luck.
Right.
The second case involves a pregnant woman who was very close to her due date and was wondering whether she should attend a close friend's father funeral or not, and she posted it online. So most of her family members agreed that it was not a good idea to attend the funeral just because of superstition. But a lot of people online were very upset at the fact that she was even considering not going due to a very unfounded concern. Because showing support and love to the people that you care most about in a difficult time is very important. So we are seeing very different opinions
Right.
on attendance in this type of events, especially when it comes to superstition.
I guess the degree of how much people follow those superstitions are different, but I guess, but for you in Spain, are there any superstitions like this?
Well, there's a few superstitions. Slowly we are seeing them disappear, but I have a lot of international friends here in South Korea, for example.
Right.
And I remember last time I went to a funeral with one of those friends, the friend told me, oh, you cannot meet a friend directly after the funeral. And I had an appointment.
Oh.
So she told me that I had to go to a cafe first and pretty much cleanse my energy before meeting other people. Otherwise, I would be projecting that bad energy onto other people.
This is not a Korean tradition, right?
It is not.
Oh, it's so interesting. Do you remember what country's tradition it was?
Egyptian tradition.
That's so interesting.
So I was quite shocked. I was like, what do you mean?
Right.
But I did do so, and I went with her to a cafe before meeting my friends just because. But in reality, it's not something that I necessarily felt inside my soul.
So I guess these do exist across the world. So it's interesting how customs that began as beliefs are often reinterpreted today as acts of consideration. And that raises an even broader question about whether such customs still have a place today. So is it reasonable, Keith, in your opinion, for people to follow those superstitions?
Sure. Before picking up the superstition that other culture was talking about, Korea has a similar thing because after you visit the funeral place, when you go home, then people throw salt at you, your family, just to lure away all the bad lucks or bad spirits away from you. Or if you can't do that, you normally stop by a certain place else before you return home so you wouldn't bring any bad spirit or ghost to your place. So that's another thing that we have in Korea. But while this belief is often considered a superstition, it also reflects a practical concern for protecting the well-being of pregnant women. So funerals are emotionally intense and deeply sorrowful occasions, right? So the tradition encourages expectant mothers to avoid that environment. And if they can't attend in person, it's perfectly acceptable to express their condolences by sending a letter or a message. So my kid's mom didn't go any of the funerals during her pregnancy. I went there instead for her if it's really important, for example, her important colleagues, friends, or friends' funeral, right? And one of the other reason was because I know she was very emotional. So when she goes, she's going to cry her heart out, and it's going to be jeopardize her mental health as well. So there's another reason. There's a lot of different reasons behind why a pregnant woman shouldn't really go to a funeral.
Yeah, so in some cases, it's not just complete superstition. There's a real reason behind it. So what are your thoughts on this?
Before I share my personal opinion, I think there's two things that I didn't take into account. The first one is that when someone is not able to attend the wedding, as you mentioned, you can be part of the representative group, right?
Have someone go instead of you. Right?
Exactly. Even if your whole family is not able to attend, you can go as a representative. So you're telling me that, for example, that was your personal case, right? And then I didn't take into account the fact that it's not only superstition, but that superstition is also sometimes grounded by scientific facts, like the fact that people can get emotionally affected by the whole situation. So I can understand how, for example, for pregnant women, it could be a tough situation to deal with the hormones, the feelings, and everything that entails that situation. Ultimately, I do think that it is a personal choice. If you think that superstition is much more important than the relationship itself, I would advise you to do whatever feels correct in your case. But you asked about whether it's a reasonable choice or not. When it comes to reasonable, I don't really think it's reasonable because we're using the word reason, right? It's such an intangible concern, and I don't think others necessarily need to adapt to it. Let's say, for example, it was my own funeral. I don't think I would be too happy if some people would not attend my funeral just because of a superstition. It depends on what type of superstition, of course, and whether it is grounded on more technical facts, like the fact that it might affect their health. But if it's just something that is in the air and is not tangible, then I don't think it's necessarily grounded, because at the end of the day, it does affect the relationship itself. And we have talked about how important it is to show up this type of events, especially because it leaves a very intense mark on the people who are grieving. And you showing up and showing that support and love can become something very important. So the fact that superstition can become an obstacle, I feel like it's a little bit of a shame. I'm not sure if you agree with me in this point, but that is my personal opinion. In Spain, as I mentioned, we had a lot of beliefs like this in the past, but I feel like they are slowly disappearing. And I feel like as time goes on, this is the future that we have to adapt to, because slowly people are becoming less superstitious and much more, let's say, rational in this type of departments. And personally, I do think that just showing care and love is much more important. But again, personal decision.
Well, so I do agree that there's a limit to certain things as well. You need to be reasonable at times. So at the heart of it, we all agree that supporting a grieving friend matters most, but people's views differ on how that support should be shown. So after looking at all of these situations, perhaps a bigger question is where we should draw the line between tradition, practicality, and personal choice. And that's why we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers who ran a poll on the Ada News YouTube channel asking, what do you think about the belief that pregnant women should avoid going to funerals? And here's what the results showed. The 3/4 of respondents, or 75%, said it's just a superstition and there's no need to follow it, while the remaining 25% felt it's better to be safe than sorry and that tradition is still worth observing. So it seems most people are taking a more practical approach, though a sizable minority still feels there's value in erring on the side of caution when it comes to long-standing traditions. And speaking of traditions, there's another uniquely Korean wedding custom that's been drawing mixed reactions both online and offline. So Fabio, should couples hold pre-wedding invitation gatherings called cheongmo in Korea?
Well, this was a very interesting tradition to me at first.
I can imagine, right?
Completely. I don't think that couples should feel pressured by it, though. Because at the end of the day, if it comes from the bottom of your heart and you really want to treat people to a meal before the event, then I think that's great, that's fine. But if it's just an obligation, it might become pressure for both sides. In fact, I do think that for guests, it becomes a little bit of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you can have this heartfelt moment that motivates you to go to the wedding, but it can also add pressure to someone who is already unsure about whether they want to attend the wedding or not. So I think it really depends on the relationship you have with people, and my advice would be to invite them first, and depending on their reaction and how excited they are, maybe treat them to a meal if you want. From my own perspective as a guest, I am not expecting a meal in return. I just attend weddings. It is not necessarily a culture that I was raised in, so it doesn't seem that important to me. But I can also understand how if I'm invited to a meal before the wedding and let's say Ki-hyun is not, maybe Ki-hyun might feel some type of way. So you
That's
need
true.
to show that respect to a lot of people. And I also heard other perspectives on how some people don't even realize they are being invited because they didn't have that formal space where they were told directly.
Right, it's become so complicated, unnecessarily so complicated. What's your thoughts on this, Ki?
So to be a little bit more specific, that's a unique Korean tradition, right? The wedding invitation gathering where the bride and groom invite people and then personally meet guests, hand them the wedding invitation in person with the letters, printed out version. Well, I said a tradition, but it used to be a must thing. Amongst the friends or amongst the colleagues and peers and seniors, because it's meant to add a personal touch to the invitation process. So couples meet their guests face to face, treat them to a meal, and formally invite them to the wedding. That's a sign of respect. Even today, many Koreans still feel that sending only a mobile invitation can be, it can be impersonal or it can be even rude.
Right.
Take my case, for example, some of the seniors and older peers. I was super busy at the time, so I couldn't meet every single one of them, right? But then some of the elders didn't show up at my wedding just because I didn't give them a wedding invitation personally, and they thought they were not formally invited. They thought it was rude to just send them the mobile invitation. So later I had to apologize to them.
Oh,
Wow,
really?
so it's really complicated because, as you said, if someone, it becomes a comparison thing. Like, so this person got to attend a cheongmo, this person
Right.
didn't get one.
Also, when you print out the wedding invitation, the letters, you print out for two batch of people, your guests and your parents' guests.
All the different types of
Because your parents
invitation.
also go out to send their friends and their colleagues,
I see.
their peers to send the wedding invitation out.
Sounds very complicated, there's a lot of things to consider. So on one hand, it can be seen as an unnecessary burden, while on the other hand, it can be thought of as a thoughtful gesture that adds a personal touch. And perhaps that reflects a broader question about how much tradition should give way to convenience. So as with our previous poll, we asked our viewers on Arirang News YouTube channel where they stood on this issue by asking, what do you think about pre-wedding gatherings hosted by the bride or the groom? And the results were fairly close. So 57% of respondents said pre-wedding gatherings hosted by the bride or groom are a good idea, while 43% felt it's better not to have them. So despite the growing emphasis on efficiency, it seems many people still do appreciate the personal touch that comes with meeting face-to-face before the big day. And with that, we've covered everything from wedding gifts and old friends to funeral customs and invitation gatherings. So to close off our discussion today, what are your biggest takeaways from this, and what are your personal final thoughts on what social events we should or shouldn't feel obligated to attend, Key?
So showing up is obviously important, especially you want to build a social relationship around you. And to be honest with you, I've done all those very important events, right? Wedding ceremony about 10 years ago, kid's first birthday about 7 years ago, and my father's funeral about 3 years ago. And when you do it, you do sort of get to reconsider about your relationship with others. It's like you're reorganizing your phone book, to be honest, because
As a
you're
good
looking at
person.
looking at your guest lists, you reconsider, right? And so it does matter to show up, but again, now the culture is changing, especially among the younger generation. So the couples or anybody who's having those sort of events shouldn't be too much pressured.
I hope you didn't have to delete a lot of people from your
I didn't.
Great.
Probably didn't.
That's good. What about you, Fabio?
But we all have the gift of free will, so we can choose whether we want to attend or not. But the reality is that relationships need to be nurtured. And in some way, I do think that, again, showing up is important. It does depend on the event itself, though. For example, for funerals, I do think that missing out on funerals is a little bit tougher. And I used to have this thought in the beginning, before going to any funerals in my life, that maybe if I show up and the family doesn't know me, I might be a little bit out of place or even a burden to the family. But after, unfortunately, having a few funerals this past few years, I realized how important it is to be there for people who are grieving, even if it's a first meeting. If you knew the person, funerals are definitely something you shouldn't miss. Weddings, however, seem to be a little bit more personal. You might take into consideration your relationship with that person, and we need to also understand the fact that guests have to go through a lot of scheduling, preparing money, and other sort of obstacles. So it is obviously a choice. We also have other events like graduations, award ceremonies, or concerts that our friends or people we know might do. Even if you're not able to show up, I think the minimum respect is just letting them know why, and just the fact that you're not going to be able to make it beforehand.
Right. So, I mean, at the end of the day, social events are about more than obligation. They're about connection. But as expectations evolve, so does the way we choose to show up. Perhaps the real question is not about what we should do, but what feels truly meaningful to us. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. When Newsgen will be back on Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Key.
Thank you.
And also Fabio.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you for coming on. And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this weekend, the only RSVP you need to make is to yourself or to the one party you actually want to show up for. We are
News Generation.